Well, Priya and I had a
Uh,
crazy day today. Or was it today? It was yesterday. I'm
Yesterday.
like
yes.
in a blur.
Yeah, we decided
I
last minute to
literally,
fly to New York.
I literally texted Priya. I was like, "Oh, so when are you pulling up to the pregame?" And then she was like, "Oh, I'm not coming anymore."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh,
But I
okay."
actually woke up on Saturday and then just was thinking about SantaCon, and then I FaceTimed Parm because like I knew Parm was going to Rohel's birthday, but in my head I just thought he was at SantaCon because him and Sahaj kept texting each other in the chat. And then when I FaceTimed him, I realized he was in New York and they were all at Bottomless. Everyone like Varun, Anjali, Rohil, Param. And then at Bottomless, basically the waiter's like telling them that they're drinking alcohol so fast that it's illegal. Like the waiter was like, it's not even about restaurant policy, it's illegal the speed at which you're drinking. And they were like cracking up. And I was like, wait, I just need to be there. Like I just can't even be in SF for 1 second longer.
The FOMO hit too hard.
So I was like, let me just peruse like the Saturday flights. And it was like $300. And that was the same price I paid for my flight anyway. So, and then I did not think Priya would be down because she had already kind of said she wasn't down because we'd already talked about maybe going to New York this weekend. But then this whole time, Priya was thinking the same thing.
No, I was gonna just say that I had said earlier in the week, like I was like, my spidey senses were like, I feel like this is a Zoom recording week.
Well, it all worked out.
I'm
We were
glad
on a
it did.
trolley all day today.
We were on a trolley.
And New
Yeah.
York is like snowing, so it's
It was
beautiful.
so pretty. I know.
Were you in like puffer jackets and
I
like,
mean, the trolley was really
were you
warm. Like, it was
cold?
a heated trolley. So
Oh, it wasn't like, oh, I thought it was like, I was imagining like one of those like beer cars.
no, no,
Yeah,
no,
that's what
no.
everyone imagines. I imagine that. No, it's more like imagine the SF trolleys but closed.
Like a literal, like,
Oh, okay.
trolley.
And then what'd you do? Like, did you drink or did you just watch the city?
We didn't drink because we had to do this, but everyone else did. I'm honestly so tired. I have so much work to do.
Sometimes I feel like people don't realize how much work the podcast adds. You know what
Oh
I
my
mean?
God. Yeah, okay, wait, I have a funny story. So, Open Evidence is trying to figure out how to like collect more doctor data, like more physicians talking about like patients or different rare diseases. And so they were like, "Oh, let's do a podcast and it'll be mutually beneficial because like we'll get more of a brand and we'll like use the data from the podcast for training or whatever." And then I was like, "You're gonna put in 15 hours a week to get 1 hour of audio recording?" Like and they were like, "Oh, okay, never mind." Ditch that idea really quickly.
Yeah.
That's funny.
But yeah. Okay, cool. Enough banter for the week. Welcome back to Get the Check. I'm Maya.
Monica.
I'm Priya.
And today we have some fun stories. So we're going to be starting off with the OpenAI versus Google race. If you didn't know, OpenAI declared code red last week after falling behind their projections for number of GPT users and market share. And they were worried about Google's Gemini release. And so they quickly released 5.2. And we're going to be talking about that story as well as like Google's response. Then we'll go into the Fed cutting rates. Last Wednesday, the Fed met for the last time this year and cut interest rates by 25 bips. So it's the third rate cut of 2025. And finally, we'll be doing an AV update. If you didn't know, Rivian just announced that they're going to release their own chip for their AI driving assistant. And then they're also releasing like assistance suite called Autonomy Plus, which Rivian drivers can sign up for and pay for, similar to like Tesla's subscription as well. In addition, Uber and AV Ride also launched a commercial robotaxi together. And finally, Nissan is announcing that they're developing their semi-autonomous driving system as well. So we're seeing a ton of new entrants into the AV game. But yeah, we'll start with the OpenAI versus Google race right now.
It's been everywhere in the news, but Sam Altman basically declared a code red on December 1st, which is 2 weeks after Gemini 3 was launched. And it was essentially just means all hands on deck, everyone working on ChatGPT and improving that experience, as opposed to working on some of the other things that they're working on. So we're going to get into that, but I also just wanted to frame it, I guess, in the context of both Google and also the broader market. We're still pretty early in the AI race, and we hear like all these different names like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, they're all fighting to win different markets. So they're fighting to win enterprise, they're fighting to win consumer. And so we want to dig into what those battles look like as well, and specifically highlight OpenAI and Google because that's the one that's been in the news the most.
I hadn't really heard of a code red in a company before. And when I looked up online, it was like, is Signal's near existential competitive threat, which I thought was like really dramatic for what this is. Cause like, I think what's actually happening is like they're losing market share to Google. Have you ever heard of a company implementing code red before, or like have you ever been in a company that does that? Because I just had never heard of this concept.
The most famous one that I saw when I was researching was the Microsoft Co-Red, which happened in 1995. And it was essentially like the beginning of the internet. So it's the same way like we're early in AI. This was at the beginning of the internet, and it was against Netscape because they released a browser and they were worried that that could become the main platform and bypass any use of Windows. And so I do think it kind of mimics like where we're at today. I don't know about this specific instance, but it was like a similar environment of like market defining moments.
I've never heard about it in general, but they went from 203 million to 191 million daily visits. So it was a 6% decline in user growth. And user growth has also slowed in August to November. I think the second part of that story is what's worse is like user growth still slowing. Everyone talks about like the flywheel of OpenAI's money going from Nvidia to OpenAI back to Nvidia, etc. And if you think like one of the biggest companies propping up the American economy is not meeting their projections for a quarter, that's quite concerning for the rest of the United States. I guess that's how I read the report, but yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess earlier this year, too, in October, Nick Turley, who's the head of ChatGPT, also said that this was the greatest competitive pressure that they've ever seen. So it's definitely something that they've been thinking about. And even with the recent Menlo Ventures report that came out of like the state of AI, they have dropped like significantly in terms of market share. So I do think it is valid in a lot of ways because it's basically where Google was at, what, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when they also kind of declared a code red. Literally everyone came back to the company. They went all hands on deck on working on Gemini. And so I think that's kind of this is OpenAI's version of that right now.
Yeah, and I feel like I've been thinking more as we talk to founders and like do this podcast about what my like startup philosophies are. Like, let's say I was a founder in like 5 years, like what would be important to me? And I actually do think that not being complacent about your core product is really important because when you're in the hyperscale mode that OpenAI and like all these companies are in, it's easy to just assume like ChatGPT will keep growing in the way that it is. And obviously, like they're developing their model, but like there's all these other bets they're making, like ads, Pulse, which is like the personal things that they're sending people of like things you've been looking into on ChatGPT, like health agents, shopping assistants. And it's easy to think like that's where our next like 10x is. So we need to focus all of our energy there, but it can be dangerous. So like those are some of the things that I think Sam Altman specifically said they're diverting resources away from in the short term.
Yeah, and they're all going to work on like personalization of ChatGPT, figuring out how to get more engagement because like Maya said, they saw that like drop off of consumer use of ChatGPT.
I think also like what we saw with OpenAI kind of both OpenAI and Anthropic exploding at unprecedented rate like any other company before, and user preference for search and getting access to information is not as sticky as people thought it was. So like for a long time Google maintained a really high market share just because of Chrome and Google being the default search engine everywhere. But then when you brought in like clear step function difference in the informational quality when with AI, so like using GPT to search for information rather than Google, they gained market share very fast. And so then now we see like consumers willing to switch between different providers because we're in this sort of like nebulous state of figuring out who's going to emerge ahead. And so I think at any point any company has something to lose, and it seems that OpenAI is like, I mean, just anecdotally, like I've heard like employees being like, yeah, it feels like big tech, it feels like Google, it doesn't feel like very hardcore pressure anymore. And so I think part of it is like culturally, like trying to bring back that startup energy of on the brink of dying, and then also not losing focus, like you guys had said, with diverting resources away from their other bets back to this. But yeah.
Yeah, I also think like it's kind of coming full circle a little bit, Maya, with like what you're saying of like Google had the browser and they had all these ways to capture like attention on your devices. And then there was like Anthropic and OpenAI, which is a breakthrough technology, but it's going back to Google having an advantage because of their reach. Like they have Google Workspace, YouTube, Search, Android. And so now that the products are objectively comparable, even if we want to like, which we will do later, like go into the benchmarks of who's like inching ahead, the fact that Google has distribution means that they have a decent shot at beating OpenAI, even if OpenAI has like the hotter AI consumer brand, which I think they do still, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think the thing that was holding Google back this entire time was model quality. And as soon as they just became on par with it, it was really easy for them to gain market share again. So
Yeah. And so now, as a response to all of this, OpenAI dropped 5.2. They claim that they were already working on it and going to drop it at the exact same time. Maybe they moved up their timeline, maybe they didn't, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
definitely moved up their timeline.
I think they were working on it, but like I
Yeah,
think they
100% they
moved
were
up the
working on it.
timeline. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. But they say it's their best yet, and it's specifically focused on professional use. So on benchmarks, it's benchmarking pretty well. It beats human professionals in over 70% of tasks and completes them 11x faster. And I think some of the key things to call out about 5.2 is that when benchmarked, it hallucinates way less. It was like 38% less than GPT 5.1 on benchmarks, and it also has a pretty large context window. So those are some highlights of the model.
I was just gonna say like GDP val is an internal OpenAI benchmark, and it's become more important recently because it's looking at real world tasks. And when we look at like Priya said, like a longer context or less hallucinations, a lot of those things help a lot when it comes to like professional business tasks basically, because if you give a work assignment that's not like a question but more like what you'd give a junior person at work that has like multiple steps to it, though that's like when hallucinations and like deliverables that GPT had historically would like go down. But now it can basically work for like 20 to 40 minutes and come back to you and spend a lot of time thinking and actually produce a pretty good result. And one example that someone cited, it was Matt Schumer, that I thought was interesting, was he basically told GPT 5.2 Pro, he was like, I'm really busy, like help me meal prep, like I don't want it to take me too long. And he asked like a bunch of different models, and GPT 5.2 was one of the only ones where it accounted for like not only a shorter cooking time but also like really simple ingredients to like buy and a shorter like grocery time. Like it thought about the entire workflow, similar to how like if you give a human a task at work, like you could give kind of like bad instructions but they'll read between the lines and try to put themselves in your shoes.
Yeah, I think that like points out an important part about models is are lazy to prompt and don't give you like all the instructions. And so I assume as models get better, like you said, they'll be able to read between the lines and you can stay lazy at prompting.
And as they learn too, like as they have better memory and things like that, they'll also just like understand you better.
Because like what is prompting? Prompting is just with giving instructions, and like the more detailed instructions you give, the more of the work you're doing yourself, and the more of the task you're completing yourself, basically.
Yeah, my one point
So yeah,
of curiosity on
go ahead.
like the longer context and then also like less hallucinations is how time is going to play a role, because I haven't used GPT 5.2 Pro that much like as a testing mechanism yet, but I've heard it takes like a really long time to come back with results, and all of the stats that we cited like assume extended thinking time, and like OpenAI and other companies as well have proven that like extended thinking time on models does generate better results. And so like there was one person that was talking about how like they almost always still just use Claude because it's just faster. I feel like that's a solvable problem over time where like it'll probably get faster as well, or like maybe it's like quick thinking mode will get better, but in the short term, as they're trying to be like very consumer facing, I don't know.
So actually something relevant is that I heard a rumor that Composer, which is like Cursor's coding model, the reason why it's so fast is that they just dedicate more compute to it, and that the reason why like GPT-5 and like Claude tends to be slower is because OpenAI and Anthropic are trying to dedicate less compute so that they're not spending as much money for every query. And so the simple answer to the question of how do you get this faster is just to run it on better and faster chips that are more expensive.
It makes sense. So like I mean we'll go into it, but like maybe they'll have it be faster for the enterprise version then. Because it does seem like the other thing I was gonna say is like I saw people saying like it can produce like multi-spreadsheet analysis, like basically like P&L statements or like comps. And I haven't done it myself, but like anytime I've tried to use AI to create anything like client ready, it's like really bad. And so if what people are saying is true, then I feel like that's like a stepwise change.
I also wonder if that brings back Hebbia and Rogo because I know that they haven't been doing well. Both of them are AI for finance people, essentially. It's like for the finance vertical, and they really haven't cracked the problem and gone anywhere. Like the users are quite frustrated with the product experience. And some people would say it's because like a lack of data Who knows? But does the improvement from 5.2 make it enough for these products to be viable?
Yeah.
I'm curious to
Because like
see.
we've seen that. I mean, we talked about Harvey last week, and I feel like there were like very simple unlocks that made it a much more usable product. And so it really is just something as simple as like OpenAI releases a new model, or you partner with someone new to get a new type of data that can really like unlock huge potential.
Like, well, Harvey literally fine-tuned models off of GPT-3, and then GPT-4 dropped and it was like way
Yeah.
better. And then they were like, okay, I guess we don't need to do this
Yeah.
anymore. And then they focused on embeddings instead. And so, yeah, for these vertical specific solutions, how long do you just hold out until the
Good
model is
enough for
good
you to
enough for
sell.
vertical? And then you augment that with some exclusive data partnership, and then it's just good enough. Like it seems like that's what everyone's doing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And this model is also a clear push into that enterprise market. I think everyone generally thinks of ChatGPT or OpenAI is doing really well with consumers. The everyday person knows ChatGPT, and I feel like refers to things as, oh, I'm going to ChatGPT that, even if you're going to like Claude it or Gemini it. And so I wanted to look more into the overall foundational model market as well. And the Menlo Ventures 2025 State of Gen AI in Enterprise report was actually really interesting because it showed that spend in foundational models went from 3.5 billion last year to 12.5 billion this year. And so that's huge. And it shows like how important it is for one of these players to be able to capture that market, because I'm sure it's only going to continue to grow in like the coming years.
You should make a TikTok on that report. I feel like it would do well.
It was interesting though, like in the report, they estimated the market share that each player has, which I think is a very difficult thing to do. Like there's proxies of how we do it. I know like there's LLM, there's all of these different LLM like ranking tools that you can try to use. But according to them, Anthropic earns 40% of that enterprise LLM spend, which is up from 24% last year. So that's like a huge jump. And most of this dominance is due to coding, which is they have 54% of the market. On the other hand, OpenAI fell to 20%, which is down from the 50% that it had in 2023. And Google increased enterprise share from 7% to 21%. And so Google and OpenAI are not that far apart now. It's like 21%, 27%, and Anthropic is like the clear leader in enterprise spend.
I feel like the number one thing everyone's talked about with this launch is that it's a push into enterprise. Like Fiji Somo, their CEO of applications, like literally said it's like for enterprise work. And then all the examples that you could even see, like all the like bloggers that always talk about these launches, which I'm sure some of them are either getting paid or like have very close relationships. They like specifically highlighted like headcount Excel for like a finance team. Like they're very work scenario things. And
so I guess, are we saying that like a lot of the coding market share going towards Anthropic is people using it via Cursor or via other like coding products that like developers are using, and like in a similar way, like there'll be more, the product layer companies will use like maybe OpenAI instead of Anthropic, or OpenAI instead of Gemini for these other sorts of tools
what do you mean?
for other knowledge workers.
Oh,
Like
like for
like
non-engineers?
yeah, because when I look at the market right now, like outside of like the general chat experience, like what are the best products for knowledge workers? And I think the best ones are like Cursor or like developer tools in general.
I feel like that problem got solved first for like reasons that we've talked about before, which is like coding's like very rules based, and also it's like a big market to go after. Actually, like I don't know why Excel has been so hard to solve. Yeah,
Maybe it's because there's not a lot of public data, like
I'm
data
sure that's
on
part of it. Yeah,
code.
it's actually like decent at coming up with like equations, but it's not good at doing like the entire workflow. Like I feel like the way that it sounds like AI coding tools do.
So moving on, in response to all of this, Google dropped their Gemini Deep Research. It's like a new reimagined version. It's basically just based on Gemini 3 Pro. And in terms of benchmarks, they achieved 46.4% on the humanities last exam, 66% on new deep search QA, and 59% on browser comp. No one knows how it compares to OpenAI's 5.2 because there's not like direct comparisons on the same benchmarks. Like they didn't do the same benchmarks. So it's actually unclear in terms of benchmarks which one is better. But basically, they said that they don't want to concede in the professional and research applications to OpenAI.
And the one like unique thing about it is that it's accessible via API. And so developers can embed it directly into applications and like processes instead of just like us as like consumers going and using deep research on Gemini.
And I think it's too early to tell what is clearly the better one. I'm sure that the market is just taking their time to react to both of these model drops.
I feel
But
like
if
OpenAI's model drop had a more positive market reaction, right?
Well, Google's just wasn't as big.
As big,
Yeah.
yeah. But I feel like OpenAI had like a really good market reaction
yeah,
from my read of it, but I don't know.
but yeah. So that kind of concludes our section on what they're doing to kind of compete in the professional and enterprise layer. On the more consumer layer, there are two things that were announced. One was the Disney partnership. So Disney actually invested $1 billion into OpenAI, and as part of a 3-year licensing agreement, over 200 Disney, Pixar, Star Wars, and Marvel characters will become available via Sora, the AI video generation that's OpenAI.
Oh yeah, I feel like when Sora first came out, this was like the first thing I thought of, which is like, are they gonna get sued for people just using like all of these different characters? And so it's interesting that Disney went the partnership route instead of like a more confrontational route. And it kind of reminded me of when we recently talked about Suno and Warner Bros. And how Warner Bros. Settled instead of continuing to sue Suno. And it seems like there's like a first mover advantage for the first media companies that basically partner with AI companies, which everyone probably sees the writing on the wall that it's inevitable. Like, I don't think Disney wants to make it its mission to like take on, I don't know, OpenAI. And so I feel like this is clearly a smart play, but I do have a lot of like open questions. Like people have been talking about how Disney Plus already has, which like we don't know because we don't have kids and we're not kids, but a lot of other people were like they have a kid or they're younger. We're saying like online, like Disney Plus has already gone into shorter form content, like shorter episodes or like things like that, but it's not like vertical actual like TikTok short form content. And so now people are like, is Disney Plus just gonna put like a Sora feed of Disney characters in their app?
Well, they are because they said that there's going to be like a curated selection of short films that are created on Sora available on Disney Plus. So they definitely are going to end up doing that. I don't know what that process, like selection process, looks like, but
But like short films. Okay, so I don't know what it said in the exact press release, but don't you feel like they kind of avoided addressing if it's gonna be like scrollable vertical short form content, or you feel like they're definitely doing that? Because that wasn't my read.
I think they'll end
I
up
feel like they're
doing that.
definitely
Yeah.
doing that.
No, I was just gonna say the things I read online were all like, oh, like if they do that would be really bad.
I feel like they will.
Yeah, I don't think they're making the app right now, but my guess is that Disney characters will obviously be in Sora, and then as they test that, they'll bring that over to the Disney
Oh.
app itself.
I don't think Sora has been very sticky. Like it's been ranking on the App Store, but the rankings have been falling. And so this makes a lot of sense from OpenAI's perspective. Like there's even some people pointing to like Sam Altman's tweet of the Death Star from Star Wars, which is like Disney IP as well. Like way long ago he tweeted it and people were like, "Oh, did they reach AGI or something?" I don't know if you guys remember that tweet, but like now people are like, "Oh, was that like him like foreshadowing this?" Which I have no idea, but I feel like they're probably always down, but Disney was trying to decide because like at the same time Disney has sent Google a cease and desist over like copyright arguments or copyright infringements, and they've been pretty aggressive just like outside of this with people infringing on their copyright. Like I was listening to TBPN and TBPN said they've gone after like kids birthday party companies, and they once even went after or like in some way blocked a tombstone of a child that died having like a Spider-Man logo or something like that on it because they're like so strict about their IP.
Disney's IP is also, I feel like, the most valuable and most recognizable
Yeah.
IP in the world. And I mean, we were just talking about like IP with last week's story of like the Warner Bros. Netflix deal and like how much it means and how much it can add to your brand. And so, yeah, to your point, Annika, I think it totally makes sense that like OpenAI is doing this. And I think from like Disney's perspective, this is just like a huge endorsement of the fact that AI created content can be like mainstream, I guess.
If you guys had kids, what would be like the line that you would draw with these things? Like, would you be like, you can watch like TV episodes, but not like short form content? Or would you be like, anything's fine?
I feel like I would want to keep them away from short form content for as long as possible. Obviously, it's getting more and more difficult because they have access to things like iPads, phones, things like that, and short form content is everywhere. But I feel like just to train your attention span, I would want them to watch long form content. I've even seen a bunch of interesting things about how kids shows these days use like crazy tactics to get kids to pay attention to it versus in the past it was like super calm colors, like all of these things. Have you seen these TikToks?
Like
Children
brain
these
rot.
days?
It's like the brain
Yeah.
rot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like if you look at TV shows from like 15 years or when we were growing up, honestly, like they were just normal, chill TV shows.
I personally think like there's first the step of just like limiting screen time in general. Like growing up, I was only allowed to watch like 30 minutes of like TV a day, and then that was it. And then there's a second step of like, okay, well, what do you watch? And like I wasn't allowed to watch YouTube. Like I had to watch like some Disney Channel show.
That's why
So
you
I think
got
it's just
so
like
obsessed with it once you were given full reign.
I wasn't allowed to watch
yeah, probably.
Nickelodeon because apparently it was too inappropriate.
Wait, on our vacations, like my family, like once a year would go on a 1 week vacation, and the only thing I would do in some exotic location is watch a Disney, like on the TV, because they couldn't turn it off, and I wasn't allowed to at home.
But you know who I
Like
think
I'm
did such a good job is Vidya.
I
Her
I'm obsessed with her family.
Also, like her son is in middle school, I think, and like she doesn't let him have a phone and stuff. And I was like, honestly, respect.
like now that we do social media as like part of like I don't know if work is the right word, but like our project or our podcast, like my mind thinks in that way, and I do think it's like a relatively unhealthy way to have your brain structured.
Yeah.
I don't want to say like
No,
I wouldn't put my kids online because like they'll probably be super cute and like I'll probably want to content farm, so like I don't want to get like clipped later, you know, and they're like Anika said. So like I'm not making any promises, but like if you see my kids online, just know that was for myself and my bag and not for them. Yeah. Okay, well,
I think there's never
no,
mind.
sorry.
No, let's move on. We're doing
That's what
this.
I was gonna do. Sorry guys,
Okay.
we're experiencing some lags recording on Zoom. But the next thing we want to talk about, which has been in the news as well, but I feel like kind of undercovered for how big the scale of it is, that Google has had huge price cuts in India, and it's because OpenAI and Google both want to win the Indian market, which makes sense because it's like what 2 billion people now, and all of them basically have phones. It's like a phone first economy, you might say. And so whoever basically infiltrates Indian people's phones first is gonna get a huge bag. And so the big change recently was they went from like 21 USD a month to 2 USD a month, so like about a 90% price cut.
It's $2 for the first 6 months, and then it's $4.50 afterwards. But they also do bundling. So I think Google has a bundling with Reliance for 18 months, and then OpenAI has a bundling with Reliance Geo for 12 months. So essentially, like if you have like a phone package with one of these, you get this product, and then it's basically to like lock these consumers into getting used to this type of search, so that when they don't have that search anymore, they'll pay, but the price will be low enough that they won't really mind it. I think India has over a billion internet users and 800 million mobile subscribers. So even converting 5% of that population at $5 a month basically yields around $2 to $3 billion. And then as you scale that up to 50% or even 80% market share, then you can start to see that competing with how much money they're making today from the US market. And it's also a great place to start their strategy if you're thinking about like third world countries in general and bringing AI search to third world countries, just because they are a huge population, so you can do a lot of experiments to see what sticks. And then when you go transfer that to like a smaller population like Nepal, for example, but in similar makeup, you have a better idea of how to capture that market.
And the big like AI and smartphone adoption is like a huge point here as well. Like I know Annika talked about it earlier, but with like a billion people using the internet and also them having some of the cheapest data in the world, we talked about this on a previous episode, but the telecom companies had a huge pricing war. And as a result, now India has some of the cheapest data. And as part of that, they have also adopted technology. They've adopted like short form content, AI, all of these things like way more than other places. And so it's a really good market to go after, not only just from like a numbers perspective, but also in terms of like customer behavior. Partnering with the telecom companies is like the best way in, because a lot of people in India don't want to pay more for something. This, but if it's prepaid and it's already like loaded onto your phone, then they're happy to use it.
Yeah, guys, we're
Yeah, and they
allowed to
probably
say that we're all Indian. Today someone asked me if I'm Indian, and then I said yes, and then they said I hope I didn't offend you. And I was like, no, I'm not
I didn't
offended.
I also didn't know you were Indian for a little bit too.
No, yeah,
I had
it's
to
just
confirm with Priya in the beginning.
no, the funny part isn't that people don't realize I'm Indian. It's that anytime they ask me, they like ask me if I'd be offended. But no. So I think some of the things that they're like tying this with is super interesting to make it sticky as well. Like for example, Google, it's like certain AI things like higher limits on Gemini 3 Pro. They're like Nano Pro image generating
God,
model, but
India
then there's
would
like
love that.
I
India
know
would
the
go
WhatsApp
crazy for
WhatsApp
banana
is
bread.
gonna go crazy. Like, thank God I have the app deleted off my phone. But they are also pairing it with like 200 gigabytes of storage, and I feel like storage like really gets you. Like when Google had free storage, I had all my stuff on Google Photos, and now I just like pay Apple because I'm like I actually just don't want to think about this. But yeah, it's basically getting everyone addicted, you know.
Yeah. I actually wanted to ask you guys, like, why do you think the news is not covering this enough? Like, when I started researching, I was like quite shocked at the how big the market would be and how important this fight is and how little the news coverage is
I
about
feel like
it.
global,
It's in
yeah,
India.
like global news coverage in general is really bad. Like we're so
Like any
US centric.
yeah. Like I feel like anytime we've covered like an India or China thing on the pod, it's always like how did I not know this? Like when we were looking into some of the Neuralink stuff and like or even the AV stuff, how far along China is, or like when we were looking at like delivery apps and we covered like India's what was it called?
Like Zepto.
Zepto. It's just like really undercovered. I remember one time I read this like New York Times article on like the clicks they get on international articles versus domestic articles, even when the international articles are like covering literally like the biggest war happening in the world, and the domestic article is like Congress is debating this like random bill, like still people care more about that.
Everyone's just looking for clicks, including us. Watch our episode.
No, but I feel like the more interesting part to me is that like international things don't get clicks. It makes sense that it's less, but it's like way less than you'd even think. But we can psychoanalyze that maybe another day.
I was just gonna say that I actually predict that Google will win the AI race in India.
You're
Just
just
because
gonna
like
say the AI race.
oh no no
In
no. Just like
India.
I think they will win it in India because of the Android thing, where Android is I think dominates the Indian smartphone base and has 500 million users right now.
I also think like Google's a
But
household name in India, and Indians care a lot about like reputation of companies.
well, also it seems like right now Google and Perplexity are like the two ones with like the biggest telecom related deals. Not OpenAI, right?
It just hasn't been a strategy of theirs.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay.
Now onto the Fed
Yeah.
rates.
Okay, so basically last Wednesday they cut the federal funds rate by 25 basis points, and this brings the target range to like 3.5 to 3.75%, which is the third quarter point cut this year after the same thing was done in September and October.
I was saying, and it was another really divided vote. Like we've seen this when we covered it before as well. And it's not typical for the Fed to have a divided vote among all of the members, but we saw that three members dissented, two wanted to hold rates steady, and one wanted a bigger rate cut. So it's probably the most variation we've seen of like ever, honestly.
There's like a few reasons why people are divided. One reason is that the government has been shut down, obviously, for an extended period of time, not now, but it meant they had access to like limited economic and job data. And that's part of why, like, even in Jerome Powell's statement, he kind of implies that he wants to like wait and see what happens. And then I think part of the other reason why they're divided is that like they're trying to balance unemployment with inflation. And those two things like go in different directions, which is like the entire mandate that the Fed has. And I feel like right now people are a little bit worried about both.
Yeah, and what happens is like when you cut rates, unemployment tends to go down if it is a demand problem because money is cheaper and therefore people are like more companies are willing to pay more workers. But when money is cheaper, inflation goes up. And so that's why they're at odds with each other. And so what they saw was that unemployment was rising from 4.1% to 4.4% in September, which is the most recent data, and we're also in December, so that's also an issue. And job openings fell below unemployed workers for the first time since early 2021, and so they're trying to manage this risk. But it's also important to note that Jerome Powell said that like the job cooling conditions that we're seeing is a result of a lack of supply, not a lack of demand. So there's little that actually like rate cuts can help with this. And lack of supply being like less workers entering the job market as well.
And inflation's also half a percentage point above the Fed's like targeted 2%. And so, yeah, that's like why they're in a tricky spot. I would also say, I think like part of why they're having so much dissent is because like Trump has made the Fed seem like a little bit more partisan. And he's like undermined Powell multiple times. Powell's term's coming up in May. And then Miron, who's like his most recent appointee since September, basically voted for an even larger half a point cut, like zero point 0.5 instead of 0.25. And he's done that for the last two meetings. And Trump has like been pushing this agenda of rate cuts because that basically leads to short-term growth. But obviously, like the Fed is not supposed to prioritize short-term growth. They're supposed to prioritize a long-term stable economy. And so I think that's like also a factor.
Yeah. So going a little bit more into like the job stuff, there's a couple of reasons why things are happening the way they are. So one is immigration policy. So because there's more deportations and less immigrant workers coming to the US, the workforce is shrinking. The other thing is that they're starting to see the like boomer population go into retirement faster. So like what I read was since 2020, workforce employment has not hit 63%, I think is what it is. We're at 62%, so we're like about a percent off. And that's because people are retiring faster. And so then that's also an issue because if you have like less people employed, you basically have like less output from the economy. And so they want to incentivize people to enter the job and the workforce more. And so that's part of the issue as to why there's like less jobs, but making money cheaper doesn't really help with this problem. So,
Yeah, another thing that a lot of people have been talking about is the Great Freeze, and they're like using this term to describe what the job market is today, which is basically a time where there's low unemployment, but also slow hiring. Because like we've seen worse unemployment before, but we also are just seeing generally slow hiring. And the two main reasons that they point to are that there's low quit rates, which I've actually heard a lot from people, is that people are kind of just staying in their jobs. They're really uncertain about the market and what's going to happen. So they just hold on to the jobs that they have right now. And also just generally hesitant hiring and minimal job creation, primarily because of AI. Like people aren't sure what's going to happen and what roles are going to be necessary in the future. And so there is a lot more hesitancy around hiring.
the stat that I wanted to point to though was Kansas City Fed research found that job growth has slowed from 170K per month to 75K per month, meaning of like how many open jobs there are. And it's saying that the sectors that are exposed to imports are seeing weaker hiring. So like when you're importing like some sort of good and you need to process that good, the jobs related to those are seeing and slow down. And this is just directly related to the tariffs. A lot of the issues that we're seeing is tariffs are putting pressure on job growth, and then tariffs are also putting pressure on inflation. And Fed rate cuts aren't a great way to solve for this either. But yeah.
Yeah, I will say on the positive side, I feel like when AI got traction, like maybe 6 months ago, there was a lot of doomsday scenarios with AI and jobs. And obviously, it hasn't all played out yet, but at least up till now, we haven't seen jobs fall off like some type of a cliff or some like huge economic recession due to AI. So yeah, I don't know like
Yeah.
moving forward, but at least right now.
It is interesting because like the tech market is honestly not doing well at all. Like we have a 17% increase in layoffs than last year. There was like 154,000 layoffs through November. And a lot of economists are saying that the because when we look at the labor market, we're looking at it as a whole. We're not looking at like tech specifically versus everything else. Like the broader labor market is actually like cushioning the number of fires
Yeah,
that have
yeah.
happened in tech specifically. So I think that's like an interesting point as well because when I think about the market, I feel like I definitely think about it from like a tech centric view, but obviously like the Fed is taking everything into account and it's actually like the rest of the market that seems to be cushioning some of the pretty brutal numbers that we are seeing in tech.
So that was a picture with jobs. In terms of the picture with tariffs, what we're seeing is that tariffs account for about 0.5% of the inflation. So if you say inflation is 2.9%, 5% is directly attributed to tariff-driven price increases. And so they also are providing quite a big impact on the economy. People have estimated that it's equivalent to $1,800 per household in 2025 real income loss.
Credit card bill is so
Yeah.
high because of that, because of inflation.
Wait, I didn't know that it was 0.5% of like current inflation. That's a lot. It makes me think about our next segment, not to skip ahead, but like we're gonna cover autonomous vehicles, and like one of the things we're gonna talk about is Rivian. And I was listening to one of the founders' interviews, and he was just talking about how like they're still feeling the effect of COVID and then tariffs right after in the same like few years, because when you're verticalized the way Rivian is, it basically just like screws you.
Well, you also are either going to like eat the cost or pass it on. And according to what everyone's saying, they are finding that 50 to 70% of tariffs are actually being passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices. So businesses are going to eat some of it, but there's only so much they can do while still like maintaining a successful, profitable business. And so that's why that is being translated to that $1,800 that we're seeing in like increase to like US household.
Goldman Sachs estimates it at closer to 55%, and then it's going to rise to 70% in 2026. And then Powell also says that he doesn't not want to do any rate cuts in
Yeah.
2026. So I'm curious what Trump is going to do then and if he's going to soften these tariffs because it's been a while now and they haven't been super effective to what I understand and to what they were trying to achieve.
Yeah, and even more than like just the tariff prices being passed on, we've also seen that exports have also slowed because of retaliatory tariffs of what other countries are putting on us. So now we're also not exporting as much and just being as involved in like global world trade. So that's not good.
Yeah, model estimates suggest that if we keep the 2025 tariffs in place, we will shave 0.5% off of GDP growth in 2025 and 2026, which is equivalent to 100 to 150 billion dollars a year. So like literally Trump's tariffs are like what is it to like 100 anthropics? Is that like a
That's our
no, no,
unit
no.
of
I'm sorry.
measurement.
Sorry, 10 Anthropics or like
Number of
5
anthropics.
OpenAIs. No, no, no. Like I just think about it in terms of like how many companies are producing that much value. And just by having these tariffs, like how much value are you shaving off of the economy? But yeah.
Good thing we're not in that Fed meeting. Well, moving on, the next thing we wanted to talk about is the autonomous vehicle space, which you already know we love to talk about. And so basically, Rivian announced their custom autonomy chip and driver assistance suite called Autonomy Plus. Uber and AV Ride, I actually had never heard of AV Ride until this, launched a commercial robotaxi, and Nissan announced it's developing camera-based semi-autonomous driving system. So we'll get into all of it, but I think the TLDR is that robotaxis are like here to stay and other companies are going to move into the space beyond Waymo and that they're also using Uber. It's not just Waymo using Uber. So Uber will kind of become this platform where like you can get an AV, you can get like a human driven car. And then I think the Rivian and the Nissan moves indicate that like people are trying to make some form of self-driving cars more mainstream because right now like originally Tesla was at a more luxury price point and now they're not, but they're like the main offering, I would say, and Rivian was at like this luxury price point. They're moving into more of like a everyday consumer car, and Nissan's always been an everyday consumer car, and even if they don't do like full autonomous, like neither of them right now have full autonomous systems, but even like semi-autonomous I think shows that the new standard for buying a car very soon is going to be that your car is semi-autonomous once it's offered at this like 50K price point.
Yeah, I mean, people don't even talk about it right now, but like the new standard for buying a car is like making sure you have like what is it like lane assisted driving. You have like smart cruise
Yeah.
control where your car doesn't veer off the lane and like slows down on the highway when other cars slow down. And so yeah, we're just gonna start to see these capabilities increase. But we can move into Rivian. So they unveiled their first custom self-driving chip, which is called the Rivian Autonomy Processor. So it's basically instead of using NVIDIA chips, they're going to use their own chips. And the other thing is that their new car, their Gen 3 autonomy platform will include 65 megapixels of camera, a robust radar array, and a front-facing LiDAR system, which means that they believe that LiDAR is necessary, which is kind of just like a point to whether or not the constant conversation we have is like, is LiDAR necessary to reach like L4, L5 level of driving
Yeah,
autonomy? But
and
yeah.
Tesla infamously does not think they need that. They have a pure vision approach, but yeah, Rivian's doing the camera, radar, lidar, basically what a lot of other people are doing in the market today.
And I thought it was pretty interesting because I feel like it was like the first looked at what LiDAR would look if it's not ugly. The con to it is that it doesn't have like a 360 view that a Waymo does because it's basically like nestled in the front of the windshield and there's like a little pocket that it sits in and so then you kind of get like a 180 view of everything in front of you, but you don't get to see what's behind you. And as a result, you get a clean, sleek looking car and you don't see a spinny thing on the outside, but then it helps with their what they believe is like a map of like the world around them. So I think it's just like the first time we've seen be implemented
Yeah, and I feel
there.
like form factor is important to Rivian. Like we all work at the Rivian store all the time. There's a Rivian coffee shop, or it's like it's not a coffee shop. It's a
It's
it's
not a
a
coffee shop.
what are they called?
It's a
Co-working
co-working
space?
No,
space.
no, it's a dealership. It's a dealership for Rivian, but they also have a co-working space. Sorry guys, I'm tired. And he's like so well put together. And Rivian is like super true to their mission, which I wanted to call out because their mission is keep the world adventurous forever. And I feel like it does actually guide a lot of their company efforts, and you see it in the choices that are made. So the one that I thought about immediately when I was researching this was I saw that they released their new color for Rivian cars, and it's called Borealis. It's like this purple color, and it's inspired by the Aurora Borealis. And I feel like that's an example of how they stay true to their brand. And like the form factor in this case is like another thing that stays true to their brand. And even like when they were talking about it, I think it was like their chief software officer, he said that they want Rivian to help people explore the world, and there are different ways to of going about that. So whether it's like off-roading or seeing the world through technology, all of that falls under that umbrella. So they always definitely like draw back to that point.
I won't even lie, this purple Rivian is really ugly. Have you guys seen it?
Yeah.
You would
But
hate
like,
it,
have you
Priya.
seen? I've seen it. But like, have you seen all of their colors? Like the blue is crazy
No,
too.
I mean their design. Well, okay, like their design is obviously good. These colors are interesting, but I honestly think that's their vibe. They don't care. I almost feel like if they make decisions that are true to their mission that actually like undercut their revenue. And one example is like they don't allow Apple CarPlay, and like I actually don't know what Apple CarPlay is like because I don't have a license. I've never driven a car, but my vague understanding is like it kind of doesn't mess with their like it doesn't align with their like design feng shui. So they're gonna like add voice and like all this stuff to cars eventually. But when the founder was asked about it, he was just like, yeah, we know some people will like choose not to buy a Rivian because of the CarPlay thing. And like, if that's you, that's fine. Like this
Yeah.
interviewer was like, yeah, I like want a new car, but like CarPlay, blah, blah. And he was like, yeah, like if you don't want a Rivian, like that's fine.
Yeah, but
They're kind of just like
Well,
above everyone.
but their stock has dropped 90% since they've IPO'd. So they were like the sixth
I
largest
thought that
IPO in
was
history.
Lucid. Okay, I was having this conversation
That
with
was
Priya.
Rivian, yeah.
they did pop though
Oh,
upon this.
They
They
did
were
pop
up
on
like
this.
18%, I think.
wait, Priya, remember when I had this whole conversation with you?
Yeah, but we were in the plane and we had no Wi-Fi and we couldn't look it up.
You're correct about Lucid, but it is also Rivian that has not done well, is my
I actually
understanding.
think their R2, which is like the affordable car that they're planning to roll out, they announced it last year and they're set to launch it first half of 2026. I think that'll do well because it is an affordable car. I honestly just think they kind of took a Tesla approach. Like Tesla at first was a luxury car brand and they had like their Model S that was like really nice, really expensive, and then they launched the Model 3 and it did great for them. And I feel like Rivian's R2 will also do really well for them because it's affordable. It'll have these like autonomous driving assistance features, or like as they get rolled out, they'll be incorporated into it. And I feel like it'll be a good option.
Yeah, they are still though like losing money on every car they sell. And so I feel like they have to figure out their profitability issue. I'm kind of like surprised that Tesla like who's Tesla's biggest competitor? Like not in terms of like actual car someone buys instead, but like vibes based, you know?
I feel
I
like
was gonna
Lucid
say
and
Lucid,
Rivian.
yeah.
Because I was gonna say like I feel like them, but then like it doesn't make sense to me that Tesla does like so well and they do so bad.
They actually like really started doing well once they dropped the Model Y. Like that was a step change
So
function.
do you
Like
guys
both
think
the
we
Model
should
3
buy
and the
Rivian right now? Like maybe this is our next good
This
pod
is
prediction right here.
yeah. Honestly, I could see it.
Like, cause I know the
get the check
stock
segment
pop,
for
but they're
Red.
like it's still so down.
Yeah, I also remember this was a while ago. We had looked into this for some other reason, but I remember them saying that they were working on all of their factories and stuff. So, like, they knew that they weren't producing the number of cars that they could actually produce in a year. And it was because they were re optimizing their factories for the R2. Okay, okay. Thank you. Sorry, the space closes at 11 in 7 minutes. So they were basically retrofitting their factories for the R2 so that they could mass produce that because they're expecting to have like really high volume on that. And so they actually this year took a loss on not producing as many cars as they said that they actually like would be able to otherwise to optimize for this. So I think that could also be part of the reason that they like haven't performed as well, but could do well in the future.
Okay, Uber and AV Ride. So Uber just announced their partnership with AV Ride, which is it'll be a commercial robo taxi service, and it'll be essentially, like, there'll still be like a safety operator in the driver's seat, so it'll be positioned to take over at any time. It'll be in Dallas, and you can opt into like it being like an Uber X. So they'll try to just like weave it into you calling an Uber X, and so you don't have to worry about what car you call. You'll just get either a human operated car or a AV car, and it won't matter to you because you'll still be safe. But yeah.
Yeah, and to the point of like Uber developing this platform that just has a bunch of players on it, they have 20 partnerships with AV companies right now across like freight delivery and robotaxis. So that's like WeRide, Nuro, Waymo, like all of these different players. And so I think that they are positioning themselves well, because I remember we had a conversation probably like a year ago now of like, is Waymo just going to kill Uber or not, or like what's going to happen? But I think they are becoming like just a base layer of like anyone can use them and get rides.
I think they just want to become the operator
Hmm.
for AV.
Which is fun.
I feel like it's clear that Google wants to also be an operator. Or like Waymo also wants to be the operator and the AV supplier. Because they're like entering all these cities and they're
So
not really
many
indexing on
cities.
partnerships. Yeah, like they're focusing more on city adoption rather than like partnering with Uber and getting Uber to do the ops cost. And like it wasn't clear a year ago what would come first, but it seems to me, at least the direction and the vibes that I'm getting, that they are just going to directly compete with Uber.
I
Yeah.
just don't think Waymo needs Uber.
Yeah.
I also had not of AV ride before this, but it was founded in 2017 and came out of a Russia-based technology, and it was basically their self-driving division that spun out and became like a US-based company.
That's a W for Russia. W in the chat. You know, someone just commented on our TikTok and said, "Oh my God, it's like TVPN but girls," which is so bullish for TVPN because everyone used to say it's like all in but girls.
Yeah, wait.
They're up. I feel like it says less about
They're
us and a lot more about them, you know?
Oh my God.
Okay, anyways, in the last 3 minutes, Nissan is also developing a hands off, eyes on driving system by 2028. And basically, they want
Long
their
time
system to
frame.
be, it is long. We're going to be old by then. Married,
Really
hopefully.
not married.
I'm kidding. That was a joke. I'll probably not even have a boyfriend. Anyways, they want their systems to be camera based and self driving. So this is similar to Tesla. Like Tesla is the one that made the camera bet and like has been making that bet for a long time. And then they're gonna be priced at only 4K. My note's correct on that.
Yeah, it was.
That's so cheap.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how good it is.
Yeah. And then I guess like part of why it is so cheap is because they don't have like as many sensor costs because they're not using LiDAR.
Yeah.
Which is different than Rivian, which basically, like Rivian's bet is they think that LiDAR and cameras together is what works the best. And then Tesla's bet is like very camera focused, and Waymo's bet was very LiDAR focused, although Waymo has cameras too.
Yeah. Well, also hands off, eyes on. Like, you still have to be paying attention. And like to what Maya was saying earlier, we have pretty advanced technology in cars today with like lane assist and like self braking, self parking on cars that don't have these like autonomous features on them. And so I feel like Nissan is honestly just catching up with like where they have to be. And by 2028, that'll definitely be the norm of where they need to be. So, yeah.
I agree.
Cool. All right. Well,
Finished
we've
right on
got to
time.
dash. My co-working space is closing.
Wait, that was perfect
Cool.
timing. Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.